So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Jonny Cattani, and I'm joined today by Dave Foster. Dave is the founder and CEO of the 1031 Investor. Dave is a degreed accountant and serial real estate investor who is a qualified intermediary and consultant for tax saving strategies such as the 1031 exchange and the Section 121 Homestead Exemption. Dave started fix and flipping in the 90s and realized that about 40% of his profits were going directly to the IRS. Dave tells us about the updated rules and regulations around using the 1031 exchange to legally compound your tax interest that will stay with you instead of going straight to the government. Dave breaks down exactly how to use the 1031 exchange in layman's terms. He explains to us how he moved from Denver, Colorado to Tampa, Florida, over 10 years using the Section 121 Homestead Exemption so that he and his family could move onto a boat, which was a huge dream of his. Tune in to listen to how Dave raised 4 boys on his boat while investing in properties with the 1031 exchange. Dave, welcome to the show.
That's awesome. Thanks. Great to be here, Jonny.
Yeah, it's a long-winded intro. I love it.
I got tired listening to it.
We almost just answered the whole entire podcast. I think it's over. We got everything.
Oh, golly Moses. Well, and to talk about the floating zoo, that's what it felt like raising 4 kids on a boat.
I can only imagine, and I can't wait to hear all about this. So let's, we kind of alluded to it, obviously started with some fix and flipping, realized that's not where the best tax incentives are. So kind of talk about, your progression from there into the commercial space.
Yeah, it was kind of it was really an accident to drop in to this entire thing. We had just had our first child, and we realized that the most precious commodity we've got is time. It's not money, it's not anything, it's time. And we wanted to maximize that time. So, like so many people in today's market, we turned to real estate as the vehicle to get us out of the rat race and to be financially independent and do what we wanted to do. And it was right after the first fix and flip that I realized that I've got a silent partner. So do you. Everybody has a silent partner, and his name is Uncle Sam. And if you're not careful, Uncle Sam always does better than you do. And that just really frustrated the heck out of me, because we had a 10-year goal to get on the boat and get out of Dodge. And I looked at that and said, man, it ain't going to happen in 20 if I have to keep doing this kind of stuff. And right at that moment in time, it was 1996, I believe, there was a huge court case that was settled between the IRS and a guy named Sturger. And these things called the 1031 exchanges were all of a sudden going to be available to every normal investor. And all they are is simply a process that you follow that lets you sell investment real estate and use the process to go buy new investment real estate, and you don't have to pay tax in the middle. So let's say you've got a $100,000 gain on a piece of property. Maybe depending on your state, that's going to be like $20,000 in tax. Rather than pay that, you get to use that $20,000 to either go buy more real estate. Well, that's a down payment on a $100,000 house. Or you use it to generate more income. And if you're, say, making 10% on your real estate, that's $2,000 a year that goes into your pocket instead of paying the $20,000 out once to the government. So it was like the light bulb clicked on, and I said, that's it. That's what we're doing. And over the course of the next 10 years, well, I had some good friends along the way. You know who your good friends are, Jonny? The ones that mock you mercilessly and then come alongside and show you a better way.
Absolutely.
I had some friends who mocked me about the taxes. You're an accountant, Dave. You did that, whatever. But then they said, we're going to start a business providing 1031 exchanges for others. And I said, let me in. 20 some years later, Here we are. We took 10 years and positioned our real estate portfolio from Colorado to Connecticut to Florida, and along the way, bought a 53-foot sailboat with tax-free cash. And I've also helped thousands of investors along the way doing the 1031 exchange and combining that with the 121. And that's my story. Haven't looked back since.
I love that. That's awesome. What a great story. And I know so many people are, especially now, obviously this industry is becoming incredibly more popular as, you know, people are starting to realize these incentives and these different things they can do with their money and not pay taxes or defer taxes and all the different things. So let's start with the 1031, kind of give a high level of what the 1031 even is, what it means, you know, why it's there. I believe it started with just being able to do business, and then eventually it worked to actually being able to use it in real estate. Is that correct?
Well, actually, there's always been a real estate component to it, as well as business. But in 2018, the IRS took away the business equipment component of it. So you used to be able to exchange airplanes for airplanes, heavy equipment for other heavy equipment, restaurant equipment, and those kinds of things.
Got it.
But it's been part of the law since 1920. And originally, what it was designed to do was to help cash-strapped farmers grow their agribusinesses. We were in the agricultural era, starting to move towards industrial, but what that meant was that farms were starting to combine, and we were starting to see agribusiness. And the problem that they realized was happening was that a farmer might be able to sell his small farm to go buy a bigger farm, but by the time he paid the tax, he wouldn't have the money to do it. So he couldn't sell his old farm. So what does that mean? Number one, he couldn't grow bigger. That hurt our agri economy, but it also was a barrier of entry to anybody else who wanted to start a new farm. So what the IRS said was, let's make that easy so that they can sell and grow their real estate holdings without having to pay tax. So now they could take all of the revenue from the sale and go buy new real estate. And the lawsuit that was settled basically then allowed us to do this for any kind of real estate. So it doesn't just have to be agricultural. You could sell a single family rental and go buy multifamily. That's kind of a traditional path, isn't it? We want to grow bigger. Or you could sell one and go buy two or three and start to grow your holdings that way. And the key, though, is that you're doing that every time and using the deferred tax to buy more instead of pay tax. So over the course of time, the deferred tax builds up, right? But so does your portfolio. Till finally you decide to, liquidate at some point in time and pay the tax. We do an example for folks when we're teaching classes where we can show in 4 steps how 2 investors who do the exact same thing, the only difference is one of them pays the tax and the other one does 1031 exchanges. So they get to use the tax as part of the down payment on the next property, which automatically means that taxpayer gets to buy more real estate. In 4 transactions, the investor who's doing the 1031 exchanges at the end of that controls almost $12 million of real estate. The investor who pays the taxes has about 4 million, which, hey, that's not bad, but which would you rather be?
I'd rather have the 1031.
Absolutely. And so that's what the 1031 exists to do, is it allows you to indefinitely defer paying that tax and you get to continue using it for yourself.
Awesome. And there's some incredible incentives that I know we'll get to, like being able to even pass that on to next of kin and like put it in a will. And these things can continue for generations. But let's kind of stay in the beginning here. We know why it was formed, what it's used for. What does it look like in terms of using a 1031 and kind of some of the nuances when you're, starting to use this tool?
Yeah, like anything, the devil's in the details, right? And of course, the IRS, we always remember that the IRS lost a lawsuit. And so you can just bet they weren't real happy. So they have to let us do it. It doesn't have to be user friendly. And so that's where the details of it come into play. So what you're going to do simply is sell a piece of real estate that you've owned for productive investment use. Single family rental, multifamily, it doesn't matter the type of the real estate. What matters is how it was used and that you're going to sell it either with a profit or highly depreciated. And that's one of those complex kind of components that people don't generally think of, but depreciation is one of the huge benefits of real estate investing. It's that pretend game that the IRS plays with you, where you get to pretend that your real estate loses 1/27th of its value every year. And so that's a tax write-off. It lowers your taxes. But here's what people don't realize is that when you sell your real estate, they make you pay it back. How's that for a not so nice gift? Just very temporary, unless you do the 1031 exchange. And then you get to continue taking that depreciation without having to pay it back. So you're selling that real estate, and then the 1031 is always a sale followed by a purchase. So you sell your real estate, the qualified intermediary who does these things has to be involved at the closing of the sale because the IRS requires some documentation and you cannot touch the money. They're very strict about that. So your exchange starts, the qualified intermediary has the money, and you've got 45 more days to identify your potential replacement properties. That's all you got. At the end of day 45, that list is set in stone and can't be changed. So, like in today's market, we all know how crazy it is. I kind of tell people don't look at that as 45 days to identify. You really need to think of it as 45 days to get it under contract. You got to get rid of some of that risk because the IRS doesn't care. If you've got 3 properties on your list, you're past day 45 and you got to outbid for all of them, you're SOL, baby. There's no more exchange for you.
Yeah, a list of deals means nothing to the IRS because anybody can just come up with, properties they're identifying. And you kind of alluded to it, off camera before we started recording. There's kind of a nuance where it's tough to get into syndications, or it can potentially be. I know that a lot of capital raisers, talk about trying to avoid 1031s if they can, but they'll take them on. So kind of talk about kind of the nuances for, a passive investor, potentially getting into commercial real estate with a 1031.
Absolutely. So that actually leads us right into 2 more of the requirements. So remember, the first requirement was that it has to be real estate that you've held for investment. The second requirement is that the taxpayer for the old property has to be the taxpayer for the new property. So if it's you that own the old property, you have to take title to the new real estate, and it has to be real estate. So here's our problem with syndications. The typical syndication is a limited partnership or a limited liability. And what they're selling is a membership interest in that LP or that LLC. So if you're trying to do a 1031 exchange, you're selling real estate, but you're buying a membership interest in an entity that owns real estate. You're not buying actual real estate. So it doesn't qualify. And that's the problem. Now, those that can do it are actually selling you a piece of the real estate that you own as a tenant in common. So maybe it's a $10 million property and they're selling you 5%, $500,000 of the actual real estate itself. Well, now there's 2 owners. The LP owns 95% and you own 5%. Now, the syndicators that can do this are typically the ones with in-house financing, because you're absolutely right. It's a hassle for them to do. Typical lenders don't like it. So that's why it's so hard. But like I was telling you, there's such an elegant answer to this that actually lets the investor multiply their revenue streams. And that is to go ahead and do your 1031 exchange. Let's say you're tired of single family and you want to move into some other kind of investment, like say maybe multifamily, and you'd love to do a large multifamily syndication. Well, you can't do that because of the restrictions on taxpayer, but why don't you sell the single family, do a 1031 exchange, and go buy a small multifamily? Complete your 1031 exchange. Voila, you're a multifamily investor. And then immediately do a cash out refinance and take those proceeds, which are tax free, and use that to invest in an LP syndication. All of a sudden, you just multiplied your revenue streams, didn't you? And there's kind of this curious little thing when the stars align because of the incredible appreciation that's out there right now, that if you're willing to take a property that you're selling for $500,000 and you've got $100,000 in mortgage on it. That's not uncommon in today's market if you've owned it for a couple of years. Sell that property, and remember, you have to buy, and this is another rule, you have to buy at least as much real estate as you sold. So you got to buy $500,000 in real estate. But you've got, excuse me, $400,000 of cash that you have to use to buy $500,000 in real estate. So take 100,000 of that and use that as a down payment on one property. Take the other 300,000 and go buy another property for cash. You just created your own refinance possibility, didn't you? Because over here now you completed your 1031, but you also have a property that's free and clear. So at any time you want to, if the right syndication comes along, boom, cash out of 5, take the $250,000 in cash that you could get for that, put that into your syndication. All sorts of ways to play with that, but keep the tax still deferred inside the 1031.
Wow, that's incredible. So really, the biggest, from what I hear your understanding, is the biggest concern that, you know, in commercial real estate is just making sure that you're following the rule of, you know, going from actual real estate to actual real estate, same size or larger of a deal, right? Can't be smaller. Okay, so those are kind of the nuances, like you said, devil in the details. But really, this is an incredible tool, and like I mentioned, this can continue, right? You can leave this for generations to come, and even potentially when you leave it behind, if I understand correctly, because of the step up cost basis, you may even be able to cash it out when they pass and not pay taxes as well. Is that correct?
We still have a few minutes left, but dare we go into the 4 Ds of 1031 investing? Because everybody's going to leave as soon as it's done. Shall we?
Yeah, let's hear
Here's
it.
the first D. The first D is defer. Because when you've got that property you've owned for a while, you want to start using the tax dollars for yourself. So when you sell it, you do a 1031 exchange, and the key is you indefinitely defer paying the tax on the profits. Second D, defer. Because as your investing career grows, it's going to morph and change. You may decide to invest in different regions. In our case, we went from Colorado to Connecticut to Florida without paying a penny in tax. It might be that you want to move from, say, California or a Salt Lake City, where cash flow doesn't make sense, but you could buy in the Midwest and get more cash flow rather than appreciation. It might be that you want to change types of assets. So you go from residential to commercial to raw land. It might be that there's what I call a hole in the market, a little tiny region. For instance, I'm going to say this and I'm going to regret it, but here's the deal. In 2015, I watched a wildfire destroy the Smoky Mountain community of Sevierville and Pigeon Forge. And at that moment, I said, Foster, you should be investing there. Because Nobody was. It had burned down. You know what happened then 6 years later? The place was hotter than a pistol. Properties were going for crazy amounts. And do you know what just happened? There was another wildfire last week.
Oh, wow.
So it's like same exact thing, a hole in the market where people will rebuild. But right now it's in turmoil. So it could be an awesome buying opportunity. But whatever it is, wherever it is, that second D is to continue deferring, because anytime you sell a piece of property, you continue to defer the tax as long as you do the 1031 exchange. You know what the third D is?
What's that?
Defer. Because anytime you move into more cash flow, or let's say you want to start positioning yourself to go into more passive investments like Delaware statutory trusts or vacation rentals, maybe your goal, because you're a skier or a rafter, a surfer, and a mountain flower viewer, you go buy vacation rental properties using the 1031 exchange in all of your favorite areas. All of the tax stays deferred, and you do a cash out refinance to buy the RV that's going to take you in between all four of those places over the course of the next 10 years. You just bought a tax-free retirement.
Wow.
And anytime you convert a property from investment into your primary residence, you will continue to defer the tax. And after owning it an appropriate amount of time, part of that tax will become tax-free. And that's where the 121 exception comes in, which we can come back to in a second. But I got to tell you the fourth D first.
Is it defer?
No, it's not. It's die, which defer would be a lot happier, but I get it. But because when you do die, you said it exactly correct. Your heirs will get the property at a step up in basis, so the tax disappears on the day you die. So ultimately, for the 1031 investor, they never pay tax on real estate in their lifetime. They get to use the tax for their entire lifetime for their own benefit. Some of it becomes tax-free, and their heirs get it tax-free for sure.
Wow.
It doesn't get much better than that.
What an incredible tool. I mean, yeah, it's just so awesome. And I know a lot of people are starting to utilize it more and more. And obviously you can speak to this, but you kind of alluded to it. We'd be remiss if we didn't get to it. So let's talk about this Section 121 Homestead Exemption and what the heck it even is and how it works.
Yeah, as good as 1031 is, this one's better. This is the Mac Daddy of all tax breaks for a real estate investor. This is it. If you buy a property and move into it as your primary residence, once you have lived in it, if you're going to sell it, if you have lived in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it, then as a single individual, you get the first $250,000 of profit tax-free. If you're married, you get the first $500,000 of profit tax-free. Do you know how many times you can do that?
How many?
Once every 2 years.
Oh, that's incredible.
Right? So if the National Association of Realtors does all these studies, and they tell us that the average person stays in their primary residence 5 to 8 years. That seems kind of long for me, but then I'm kind of crazy that way. But let's say that you did that. That means that 8 or 10 times in your lifetime, you have the opportunity to do nothing but simply sell the place you're living and put the profit in your pocket tax-free and go move into another one. That's it.
Gosh, that's incredible.
All
So
right.
really this 121 exemption is just that staying in there for, like you said, 2 of the last 5 years and getting that for tax-free. Oh, man, that's
Right. So it's your primary residence.
primary.
It's tax-free.
Right.
1031 is investment real estate. It's tax deferred. But do you want me to throw some gasoline on the fire here?
Absolutely.
Okay, what if you bought a property, you lived in it for 2 years, you loved it, but you're not ready to sell it yet? Move out of it, turn it into a rental for 3 years. What happens? You get rental income, you get 3 years of appreciation, you get 3 years of depreciation. And as long as you sell it so that you have lived in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to selling it, you still qualify for the full $500,000 of profit tax free.
Wow. That's incredible.
And what about the reverse side of things? Let's say you screwed up in reverse and you got $1 million in gain on your property. Well, you could sell it, get 500 tax free, got to pay tax on 500,000. But if you move out of it, turn it into rental for a year, then when you sell it, did you own it for 2 out of the last 5? Yep. So 500,000 is tax free. Is it being used as an investment property? Yep. So you 1031 the rest. So you don't pay any in tax. 500,000 tax free, 500,000 tax deferred. That is how, my friend, we moved from Colorado to Connecticut to Florida and bought the sailboat, because periodically we would convert one of our rental houses into our primary residence. And back before 2008, you got to take the entire gain. So we did that a number of times. And every time we did that, the money went into the boat kitty. And so that's how the boat was paid for, with tax-free dollars. And then everything else positioned our real estate in Florida, where we had our vacation rentals and our multifamilies and our commercial stuff. And that's what kept us sailing while I kept plugging leaks in the boat.
Wow. That's incredible. Now listen, like I invest in crypto, very small portion. I dabble, so to speak, and shout out to people who want to do that full time. But man, the incentives are just not there like they are in real estate. And that's what I tell people. Like it is so feasible for someone to get into this industry in some form or fashion, never pay taxes, all legally, very legally, with incentives, with deferrals. You become a tax professional and you bonus depreciation and all of these things that are available that again are incentives, right? Because really what we're doing is we're creating housing for people, and the IRS is always going to support that, really. So I want to talk about this sailboat. It's obviously been a long time dream of yours. So have you always been into sailing? And then, kind of talk about your floating zoo and raising 4 boys on a boat.
I don't have a clue how I ended up there, because I truly am a Kansas ranch boy. My wife grew up in Minnesota and we met in Denver, Colorado. How the heck did we turn into sailors from that?
Yeah.
What it really was is we were looking for ways to get off the grid and become able to live on our own terms. So an RV was an option. But then we said, gosh, you know what? Maybe a boat. I looked at her and said, I don't have a clue about sailing. She goes, I don't have a clue about sailing. But we went out to a friend's wedding off of Dania Point, California. And we sailed out of there on a friend's boat one day. And that was it. I was hooked. I said, this is it. And so from that day on, every vacation, we went and took sailing classes. And we looked at boats, and we spent literally 10 years trying to put that together, and ended up casting off our dock lines 1 week to our 10th anniversary of setting the goal.
Wow.
And we talk about the zoo, the greatest, we're way past this, so child services can't get on me about it. But the greatest discipline we could ever do was time out, right? That's a very positive thing. Our time out was to put them in the dinghy and tow them behind the boat so we didn't have to listen to them screaming.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that so much. Wow. Talk about whipping you into shape. That'll really.
Oh, they turned into little water rats and they love it to this day.
That's awesome. So was it a monohull or a catamaran, or what style?
It was a monohull. It was actually an old classic, because one of my mentors, this is sailboat advice now. One of my mentors said, don't pay attention to anything but the hull and the quality. because you're going to replace everything else. So we bought the longest hull we could get, which was a 1975 Cold Star, and it had about 3/4 or an inch thick fiberglass. We called it the reef breaker. So running aground, no problem.
Wow. That's awesome. I love that. And obviously you guys learned how to sail. So do you still own the boat?
No, we sold it a few years ago when kids started going to college and we had all that. But I got to tell you, the catamarans are looking pretty good for an old wannabe retired guy.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I am not a sailor. I love boats. I've always had a boat, but spent a week last summer. We part of a charter and sailed around Greece on a 54-foot catamaran, and every captain I talked to was like, yeah, these are way better.
Absolutely. It was fun being adventurous and watching the kids jump up and down and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, catamarans are a
What were
pretty
some of
nice
your
way to
favorite
go.
places that you visited?
We loved this little place called Fraser's Hog Key in the Bahamas. It's tucked up in the Berry Islands. Beautiful people. In the United States, there is an actual Civil War fort that's about 70 miles west of Key West in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And it's the greatest place in the world. And we would go and visit there. It's called the Dry Tortugas. We love that. We actually lived in Key West for 3 years on the boat. And I got to tell you, they had to drag me out of there because that was like living in an aquarium.
I can imagine. So did you do homeschooling, or since you guys were living in Key West, did you send them to school, or how did that
No,
work?
we homeschooled all the way. That was half the fun. And actually, that was to this day, one of the greatest memories is when the principal, that's my wife, got so frustrated with their lack of attention that she called them on deck and said, as of this moment in time, every student is man overboard. And then she jumped into the water in her pajamas. And you should have seen the looks. And then, of course, they all jumped in, and the rest of the school day went great. You can't do that in public schools.
No, you can't. Wow, that's incredible. What an awesome story, and obviously a very unique upbringing for them as well. And sounds like now they're off to college and creating their own lives. Are they sailors as well, or any of them sailors?
They are, as a matter of fact, two of them think of themselves as boat boys because they were actually known. We used to have a thing called the Foster Cookie Association. And any new boat that came into our anchorage, we would bake cookies and take them to them. Just a nice way of saying hi, right? For our boys, they started thinking, wait a minute, new boat, cookies for me. So they were all up for that. And there were literally boats that would meet each other in the Caribbean and find out that they had both shared anchorages with us. And they would talk about the Foster Cookie Association. That's kind of one of the fun stories. So yeah, they love that lifestyle.
Gosh, I love that so much. What an incredible story. So unique. That's awesome. Well, listen, we're up against time here, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to talk and pick your brain about it forever. But I have 5 questions that I ask all of my guests. It's the final 5 questions. You kind of alluded to this one a little bit in the beginning, but a little bit ago, what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. Start now. The only two groups in this world that have always ruled the world, bankers and landowners. Simple as
Fact.
that.
So true. So true. I remember when I bought my house 3 years ago, everyone was like, oh, be careful, a crash is coming. And now they're all starting to buy houses and wishing they would have bought 3 years ago. And it's like, well, there you go. Proof is in the pudding. What is it about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
Oh, that's such an awesome question because my why is to honor others and to treat others the same way that God treats me. And so it's the old golden rule, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated. And 1031 exchanges have given me an opportunity to give to others an opportunity to enjoy some of the same success I've had. So it's not work. It's just fun because I get to help people.
I love that so much. It's so true. What's your favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
Whatever happened to penny candy? It's by a guy named Richard Marbury, and the sequel to this as well. It's two equal books. Is called The Clipper Ship Strategy. They're written at sort of a junior high school level, so I have to struggle to read them, but I can get through them. But Whatever Happened to Penny Candy is the single best primer on inflation you'll ever read.
Wow.
And The Clipper Ship Strategy is the single best strategy book, not just for real estate, but for investing in the United States of America, using a model following the government investing themselves.
Wow. I love that.
Two awesome books, Richard Marbury.
Awesome. Okay. Good to know. I'll put those on the list. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Okay, I would be Aquaman. That's it. Hands down. That's it.
Awesome. I love that. I was going to say, if you chose flying, listen, I would accept it, but you got to choose something in the water.
I gotta be
that.
Aquaman.
That's awesome. And last question, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
We created an entire website that's chock full of like 32 videos, calculators, articles, links to contact us. It's the 1031investor.com.
Awesome. We will link that in the show notes. Dave, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.